Soon after Daniel and his companions entered into the service of the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar had a remarkable dream. Although the king's mind was deeply impressed, he found it impossible, when he awoke, to recall the particulars. In his perplexity, Nebuchadnezzar assembled his advisors and besought their help. Dissatisfied with their evasive answer, the king commanded his wise men, with threats of death, to tell him the dream and its interpretation. Filled with fear for the consequences of their failure, the magicians remonstrated that there is no one that can show it to the king. Then the king was angry and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Among those sought by the officers were Daniel and his friends. Now they submitted themselves anew to the judge of the earth, pleading that he would grant them deliverance. The God they honored now honored them. To Daniel was revealed the king's dream and its meaning. But before we move on with this significant and important information, let us look at the information regarding the things of faith. You might note that the scripture reading for this morning, found in the book of Revelation, chapter 18, verses 2 and 4, is significant from this point of view. Revelation 18, look verses 2 and 4 with this information. It says here regarding these things, Revelation 18, 2 and 4, that he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. And I heard another voice come from heaven, saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. And we continue in the information regarding the things of faith, and read in our writings the parable of the good ship, faith. There is no need to doubt, to be fearful that the work will not succeed. God is at the head of his work, and he will set everything in order. If matters need adjusting at the head of the work, God will attend to that, and he will work to correct every wrong. Let us have faith that God is going to carry this noble ship which bears the people of God safely into port. I read that sentence. It's a key sentence that is significant. Let us have faith that God is going to carry this noble ship which bears the people of God safely into port. And does it not say here in Revelation, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues? For all the population of earth is going to be consolidated into the work of divinity, one way or the other. Hebrews 11, verse 6, Without faith it is impossible to please God. For he that comes to God must believe that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. I read again in our writings. Because of unconsecrated workers, things will sometimes go wrong. You may weep over the result of the wrong course of others, but do not worry. The work is under the supervision of the Blessed Master. All he asks is that the workers shall come to him for their orders and obey his directions. All parts of our work, churches, missions, Sabbath schools, hospitals, school systems, we can add radio stations, television stations, and all sorts of things. They are carried upon his heart. Why worry? The intense longing to see the church imbued with life must be tempered with entire trust in God. Let no one overtax his God-given powers in an effort to advance the Lord's work more rapidly. The power of man cannot hasten the work. With this must be united the power of heavenly intelligences. Even if all the workmen now bearing the heaviest burdens should be laid aside, God's work would still be carried forward. Hebrews again, let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Now, the story again of the good ship Faith. A statement, a letter of interest written to a pastor more than 100 years ago. You were on a strong ship, sailing on very rough waters. Sometimes the waves beat over the deck and you were drenched with water, and you said, I'm going to get off this ship, this vessel is going down. No, said one who appeared to be the captain, this vessel sails into the harbour. She will never go down. But you answered, look, I'll be washed overboard. Let me take my chances on that ship over there, the one you can see yonder. Said the captain again, I will not let you go there, for I know that that vessel will strike the rocks before she reaches the harbour. You replied with great positiveness, this vessel will become a wreck. I can see it just as plain as can be. And the captain looked upon you with a piercing eye, and he said firmly, I will not permit you to lose your life by taking that boat. The timbers of her framework are worm-eaten, and she is a deceptive craft. If you had more knowledge, you would clearly discern between the spurious and the genuine, the holy and that which is appointed to utter ruin. Said the captain, this vessel sails into the harbour. She will never go down. In spite of what your elder said in Sabbath school, he said, our denomination, our church will appear about to fall. He said that accurately. Our church will appear about to fall, but it will not. And his statement was accurate. This is coming on the horizon. I return to the topic of the dream. The dream of the great image opened before Nebuchadnezzar, events reaching to the close of time. The prosperity attending his reign filled him with pride. In time he ceased to honor God, and he resumed his idol worship with increased zeal and bigotry. The wise men of his realm, taking advantage of this and his return to idolatry, proposed that he make an image similar to the one seen in his dream. Aha, do you not remember? Your evangelists, your pastors have presented this many times. That great image, almost as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Gold, silver, brass, iron, clay, iron and clay. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, Europe, the world. 10 toes. This is what they suggested to Nebuchadnezzar. The wise men of his realm, taking advantage of this and his return to idolatry, proposed that he make an image similar to the one seen in his dream. Pleased with this flattering suggestion, he determined to carry it out and to go even further. His image would not deteriorate in value from head to toe, but it should be entirely made of gold or overlaid with gold, symbolic of Babylon as an eternal, all-powerful kingdom which would stand forever. And I read on. The Chaldeans had never before produced anything so imposing and majestic as this resplendent statue, the dream and the one that he rebuilt. A decree went forth that on the day of the dedication, all should show their supreme loyalty to the Babylonian power by bowing before that image. Word was brought to Nebuchadnezzar that there were some among his subjects who dared to disobey this mandate. He endeavored by threats to induce them to unite with the multitude. The king's anger knew no bounds. He was a bad-tempered brute. Directing that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter. How can you heat a furnace 7 times hotter? Can you not see something here? 7 is associated with the religions or the religion of the Jewish captives. Every 7th day Sabbath. And that these Jews who observe the 7th day Sabbath are not bowing down to the replica image. And so he's saying to them, you want this 7? You'll get it 7 times hotter in the furnace. 7 times hotter. Directing that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter, he commanded the mighty men of his army to bind the worshippers of Israel's God, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Okay, a summary so far. Nebuchadnezzar's original dream, the first great image. An affirmation of faith, the parable of the good ship Faith. This vessel, our ship, good ship, this ship sails into the harbor. She will never go down. And his dream, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, this time human ambition, the second great image. Our topic for the day, the parable of the good ship Faith, and the 3 great images. Let's turn to the book of Daniel now and look at the information there, just in quick summary. You've heard it so often, you have read it so often, your pastors have presented it so often, your evangelists have presented it to the public so often. You've heard it, you know it, you understand it. Daniel chapter 2, verse 1. And in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel, now 18 years old. In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed a dream wherewith his spirit was troubled and his sleep broke from him. He couldn't remember in the morning, called the advisors. They came in, could not give an answer. You know what it was? That evening, Daniel and his friends prayed, and the God of heaven gave Daniel a rerun of the same dream that had been given to Nebuchadnezzar. The great image, gold, silver, brass, iron, clay, and so on. Then, as you have in verse 19, the secret was revealed to Daniel in the night vision. Daniel acknowledged gratitude to divinity, went to Nebuchadnezzar and explained the whole story. And then as a result of that, as we are aware, verse 28, that there is a God, said Daniel, in heaven, with a capital H if you please, that reveals secrets, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Your dream and the visions of your head upon the bed are these. And so Daniel outlined Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome, last days. And in addition, Nebuchadnezzar saw that stone that smashed the image and just broken into small pieces. He saw the second coming. Nebuchadnezzar understood the coming of the Lord in the clouds of heaven. No wonder when the fiery furnace circumstance took place and he sees divinity associated with humanity in that furnace, it's the same one that he saw coming in the clouds of heaven in his vision. Daniel chapter 3, we turn over the page, and this is what we see here. Did you know that Nebuchadnezzar wrote a chapter of the Bible? Strange as that may be. Verse 1, chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, and its height was 70 cubits, etc. Verse 2, Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, governors, all of the government leaders in all of the 127 provinces of the ancient Arabic Empire. We as the family living in Pakistan, later on Ceylon, India, but when we lived in Pakistan for a 5-year stint of service there, we were serving in a part of the ancient Persian, the ancient Babylonian Empire. For India in the Bible was what we now call Pakistan today. Next to it was Afghanistan, where we have visited many times, and that was known as Bactria back there in those ancient days. And so the king set this image up, called in the government leaders from all of the various provinces. And he had a good reason for doing that. Let's look at some of the information. At the time when Daniel was the prime minister, he was about 18 years of age. Now, Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar is now, Nebuchadnezzar is about 30 years old. Let me read in our writings. a particular book, I'm quoting a sentence, 2 sentences. Daniel was but a youth when he was carried away into Babylon. He was about 15 or 16 years of age, prisoner of war from Jerusalem to Babylon. I read 4 Testimonies 5:70. Daniel was 18 years old when he became prime minister of the Babylonian Empire. Can you imagine that? You've had some young presidents, but they haven't been as young as 18, have they? He was a member of the royal family in Jerusalem. Over there in the ancient Arab world, as a prisoner of war, he was a Jew. He became the prime minister of an Arab empire, serving the occupation government, if you please. That would not go down well with a lot of the other Jews, would it? Think of World War II. What happened to those 2 or 3 Americans that went over there and made radio broadcasts from Deutsche Welle, Radio Berlin, during World War II? They were executed. At least some of them. 1 or 2 had died before. Some of them were executed. Here was Daniel, 18 years old, prime minister of the Babylonian Empire, serving the occupation government that had overrun his own homeland. No wonder these older, experienced men in government leadership tried to pull him down. They didn't want somebody like that ruling over them. Now, Daniel chapter 3, we look at the information there. Verse 2, they built this great image. And then verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury. It says in the previous verse that we read about his temper that he was angry. This one, in his rage and fury, he is mad, total. Commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Where was Daniel? He wasn't there. It was not politically correct to have Daniel there at that time, because this second image that was standing there in ancient Babylon was overplated with gold all the way through. It didn't have the various metals, and so he was not there. And so the king speaks about these things and refers to the situation. Nebuchadnezzar is now about 40 years old. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are now in their 30s. Daniel is now 28 years old. 594 BC, 10th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, there is a major mutiny in his army. The empire is falling apart. So, the next year, 593 BC, he has this great idol erected. We know where Baghdad is today. Babylon was south of Baghdad, and the plains of Dura were south of Babylon, somewhat almost leaning against the mountains associated with Afghanistan. And so it brings this big event, bringing in all the government officials from the 127 provinces, as the Bible says, from India to Ethiopia. And interestingly, and we don't have time to turn the verse up, but Jeremiah chapter 51 verse 59 tells us that King Zedekiah from Palestine, from Jerusalem, was there also. He went over as part of the government delegation from that province that was under the control of the Babylonian government. Zedekiah was a close relative to Daniel. They grew up together. And Zedekiah is now about 25 years of age, still just a young king. He was in that great convention. And when the musical instruments blew, and everybody had to bow down and worship this great image that he had constructed, what did Zedekiah do? I don't know, but I'm going to guess. He probably thought to himself, well, I can't worship that image. I will bow down. I will not worship the image. I'll pray to the God of heaven. A little bit of an easy way out. Perhaps that was the way things went back there. Now, this great statue was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. It was overlaid in gold like idols in Thailand, almost as tall as the Statue of Liberty. Back 100, 150 years ago, there was an archaeologist, a historian from England, who visited ancient Iraq, and he went south down to the plains of Dura, and he found the remains of a huge mound. It was a square mound, 56 feet wide, 56 feet deep, and it stood about 20 feet high. He said, and this is written in a book called Hours with the Bible, written by Cunningham Geikie, page 280. This archaeologist, Julius Oppert, stated that he felt from the information he had gained, this was the platform upon which Nebuchadnezzar's great image stood. Image is gone, remains of the platform were still there. Now, I'll read some more interesting information. Prophets and Kings 5:09. At the occasion when the Hebrews and everybody else, all of the government officials from 127 provinces, when they were gathered there and supposed to kneel down and worship, there were 3 Hebrews that refused to do so. You know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, young guys in their early 30s. And I read here, when Nebuchadnezzar was so angry, Nebuchadnezzar descended from his throne and going to the mouth of the furnace cried out, "Ye servants of the Most High God, come forth." Not like Jesus said, "Lazarus, come forth." And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth before the vast multitude, showing themselves unhurt. Now, it says in Prophets and Kings that Nebuchadnezzar descended from his throne. This was a majestic, empirical event. He wasn't just sitting there on some bench or some chair. He had a throne specially erected to be imposing and to make a tremendous impression. He came down off his throne, went to the furnace, and called out those men to come out of the furnace. You might remember, he said, "I see one like the Son of Man." How did he know that? Well, as I said before, he had seen Jesus coming in his vision in the second coming. The great golden image set up with such display was forgotten. This is something Paul Harvey would have been interested in. What happened to them afterwards? The tidings of their wonderful deliverance, taken out of the furnace, was carried to many countries by the representatives of the different nations that had been invited by Nebuchadnezzar to the dedication. Through the faithfulness of these 3 young men, God was glorified in all of the earth. Quite remarkable. It turned the tide of ancient history into another different direction. The delegates, when they went back, had to carry a demand from Nebuchadnezzar that everybody should worship the King of the Jews. You can read about it, chapter 4 of Daniel, verse 1. This is his statement in this document. And here is a heathen king, an Arab if you please, who was a sun worshipper and an idolater, writing a chapter of the Bible. You've got to be kidding. But God knows what he wants in the Bible, and we have the information. I suppose there is about as much secular information in the Bible as we find in the Spirit of Prophecy. The Spirit of Prophecy has taken statements from history and so forth. We find the same thing in the Bible. Here, in Daniel chapter 4, verse 1, this is the decree. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell upon the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God has shown unto me. A personal testimony. You'll notice that it was translated into the various languages. All of those provinces had different languages. When we went to Afghanistan, we had Dari and Pashto. In Pakistan, we had Punjabi and Urdu and Sindhi. When we went to India, we had Hindi and Bengali and all of these other languages. And back there in ancient times, they had scribes who were familiar with the mother tongue of that particular province over there in Babylon, and they learned the Aramaic language. And so when there was a decree to go out to the whole empire, quite simple. All of the scribes were gathered in a news conference. The decree was given to them in Aramaic. They had to sit down, write it, and translate it into the various languages. And then the emissaries traveled by post, by horseback, quickly to the various provinces to deliver the information. That's how that happened in this particular circumstance as we have it here in these things. Now, this is the two images, the dream and the golden image that was set up. But the sermon title speaks about three images. Let's move into that direction. There is a modern parallel. 7 Bible Commentary, 976. History will be repeated. The first day of the week, a common working day, will be set up as was the image of Babylon. All nations and tongues and peoples will be commanded to worship this spurious Sabbath. We thought years ago, oh yes, it would come in. One of these days the Sunday laws would come. Didn't have any idea that Islam would rise up and be a major player in last day events. Had no idea that this strange family law of 10 days ago or less would be part of the enactment of the last days in this country. You will find other events coming up on the horizon that will be a fulfillment of prophecy, but unexpected from our point of view. Prophecy will be fulfilled. Be prepared for new surprises as they happen. History will be repeated. The first day of the week, a common working day will be set up as was the image of Babylon. All nations and tongues and peoples will be commanded to worship the spurious Sabbath. Important, and this is Prophets and Kings, important are the lessons to be learned from the experience of the Hebrew youth on the plain of Dura. In this our day, wait on, that's the fiery furnace story. Plains of Dura. In this our day, many of God's servants, though innocent of wrongdoing, will be given over to suffer humiliation and abuse at the hands of those who are filled with envy and religious bigotry. Especially will the wrath or the anger of man be aroused against those who hallow the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. We've got difficulties on the horizon. Where is your faith? Do you know why you attend church? Yes, you like to do it. You have been taught it's the correct day and it's proper. You like the Adventist lifestyle and that's good and that's proper. Are you performing these things? Is your faith limited to the fact that this is just what the Adventist church teaches, even though that is correct and most excellent? You need to know what the scriptures say and what the writings say as to where the things of faith stand. Especially will the wrath of man be aroused against those who hallow the Sabbath of the fourth day, of the fourth commandment. Now, the magnitude and intensity of coming events. This is referred to sometimes in the Adventist Review and elsewhere. I read from our writings. A great crisis awaits the people of God. A crisis awaits the world. The most momentous struggle of all the ages is just before us. Worse than anything before. We are coming to a crisis which more than any previous time since the world began will demand the entire consecration of everyone who has named the name of Christ. The world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis. A storm is coming, relentless in its fury. The conflict that is right upon us will be the most terrible ever witnessed. If you think ISIS in Arabia, in Arab lands, is hideous, wait until these things spread further. The conflict that is right upon us will be the most terrible ever witnessed. We who know the truth should be preparing for what is soon to break upon the world as an overwhelming surprise. We are approaching stormy times. Do you remember the story of Jacob? he had a twin brother, and there was sibling rivalry between these two men, and his sibling brother wanted to kill him, to get rid of him, so that the family heritage government of that little kingdom could be passed on to the other brother. As a result of that, Jacob had to flee, went up north, got married up there. Yeah, we know that story, got mixed up with his marriages, 2 girls and 2 other girls. Finally, the time came for him to make a return journey. And when he got down to the northern brooks, just on the edge of Palestine, he was caught up with by his father-in-law, bringing an army of men down there to bring them back, and this time make them prisoners. This army of men from the father-in-law, the king of the north. And then Jacob was afraid of his brother Esau, who was bringing in a contingent of soldiers. He was going to attack from the south. And so you have the king of the north and the king of the south attempting to annihilate, assassinate the contingent of families moving on their way down. Now that night Jacob prayed. He prayed a long period of time, and there was the time of Jacob's trouble when he wrestled with the angel, Michael, the archangel. He was caught between his father-in-law, the king of the north, and his brother, the king of the south. The king of the north had a similar religion, but they did mix up idols with it. You remember Rachel stole one of the father's idols, hid it in the camel's baggage, sat upon it with a ploy. And the king of the south, he was a desert king. Idol worshipping in Christianity, Rachel and the golden idol. The other was a desert religion. Seventh-day Adventists are worshipping, we are worshipping in loyalty to the Ten Commandments on the day that is in the middle of the days of worship that have been brought in counterfeit circumstances. The first change of the day of worship was brought in through, ultimately, Catholicism, the papacy. They did not want to worship on the day that was the Jewish day, is what they were saying, so they went to Sunday. The Bible, Book of Daniel, tells us that this would happen. However, 300 or 400 years later, when Islam arose, they wanted the day of worship. They did not want the so-called Jewish day of worship, the 7th day of the week. They didn't want what the Christians had, Sunday, so they took Friday. And you know, when we used to work in Afghanistan, in particular, and some of the other countries there, we could not work on Friday. Thursday, everything would close, Thursday midday. Friday was a closed day. Saturday was a closed day from our point of view. Sunday was a closed day in that country because Sunday had been brought in by the British. And so only Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and part of Thursday were working days in that part of the world. It's an interesting thing that the true Sabbath is in the middle between these two spurious Sabbath days, Islam and the apostate Christianity. Now, I move on, the Sunday issue. I need to go through these things quite quickly. In the Garden of Eden, which was the topic of part of the Sabbath school lesson this morning, God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it. You know that. Creation has been emphasized clearly in the Adventist Review by the General Conference President. Well, so he should, but he did what he should. Patriarchs and Prophets 48. The Sabbath was committed to Adam. Its observance was to be an act of grateful acknowledgement that God was their creator and their rightful sovereign. Now, back there in the Garden of Eden, you know the familiar story. Eve on her own, approaching the tree of death, having a look at it. She was, as was mentioned, deceived. But you know, before we criticize Eve, let's remember that it is not wise for us. You ought not to criticize her. It is not wise for you to criticize one of your relatives. She took the fruit out to Adam. He grabbed it, ate. Why did he do so? Out of his love towards his wife. Now, I'm addressing men. You have a wife. You love your wife. What would be your reaction if you were caught in a dilemma like this? He made a split-second decision that changed the entire direction, the direction of the entire universe, not only this planet. But we can understand. We love our wives. I love my wife. You love your wife. So maybe we shouldn't criticize Adam either. Like I said, it's not wise to criticize your relatives. Cain and his descendants, I read in Patriarchs and Prophets, Cain and his descendants did not respect the day upon which God had rested, the Sabbath. They chose their own time for labor and for rest. It has been suggested they actually chose Sunday. Divine prophecy, Daniel 7:25. He will think to change times and laws. Revelation 13, the mark of the beast. Evangelism. The mark of the beast is the papal Sabbath, which has been accepted by the world in the place of the day of God's appointment. In vision, before Moses died, before God withdrew life from him, switched him off, Moses saw the Sabbath trodden underfoot and a spurious institution established in its place. Moses was filled with astonishment and horror. How could those who believe in Jesus reject the law that was spoken by his own voice upon the sacred mount? I have been there 2,000 years after it happened, 2,500 years after it happened. And the opening night, Elder Ted Wilson showed Mount Sinai and the commandment location. How could those who believe in Christ reject the law that was spoken by his own voice upon the sacred mount? How could any that fear God set aside his law, which is the foundation of his government in earth and heaven? With joy, Moses saw the law of God still honored and exalted, at least by a faithful few. And in some of our churches, we are a faithful few, even here in Indiana. The final great test, Revelation 12:17. The dragon was wroth with the woman, went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now I read from our writings. The Sabbath question is to be the issue in the great final conflict in which all the world will act a part. The last great conflict between truth and error is but the final struggle of the long-standing controversy concerning the law of God. Sunday keeping is not yet the mark of the beast. The time will come when this day will be the test, but that time has not yet come. This solemn period is not far off. When the decree shall go forth in this your country, our borrowed country, when the decree shall go forth enforcing the counterfeit Sabbath, the line will be drawn clearly between the false and the true. Those who continue in transgression will receive the mark of the beast. These things are for us here in the writings that will go forth as a decree regarding the day of worship. I continue on with a little bit more information. Disaster ahead. When our nation shall enact laws enforcing Sunday observance, the law of God will be made void in our land. National apostasy will be followed by national ruin. What does that mean? There was one dissenting judge regarding that family law a little over a week ago, and he said that the downtime, the long-term result from this new family law will be the destruction of this country. The papal Sabbath will be enforced by the combined authority of church and state. There will be a national apostasy which will end only in national ruin. The only era of decent living upon planet Earth has been your era. It is over. It's gone. Finished. The Protestant world will learn what the purposes of Rome really are, only when it is too late to escape the snare. She is piling up her lofty and massive structures, in the secret recesses of which her former persecutions will be repeated. Dark Ages torture in some of these big buildings. Great Controversy 581. There is a final call. I heard another voice out of heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people," which you've already done. Large numbers will be admitted who in these last days hear the truth for the first time. Multitudes will receive the faith and join the armies of the Lord. A large number will take their stand upon the Lord's side. What is my counsel for God's people? What is the Lord's counsel for his people? Great controversy. As we approach the last great crisis, it is of vital importance that harmony and unity exist among the Lord's people. When the decree is issued against commandment keepers, the people of God will flee from the cities and the villages and associate together in companies, dwelling in the most desolate and solitary places. In the mountains? In Indiana? You've got to be kidding. I don't know. There are stormy times before us, but let us not utter one word of discouragement. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. In the closing period of earth's history, the Lord will work mightily on behalf of those who stand steadfastly for the right. He who walked with the Hebrew worthies in the furnace will be with his followers wherever they are. His abiding presence will comfort and sustain. He is able to save to the uttermost those who have put their trust in him. And so that's the story of the three great images. The dream, Babylon, Medo, Persia, Greece, Rome, world, gold, silver, brass, iron, clay. The one that was erected, gold, 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 overlaying clay. And then the third one is the fact that this is a parallel of Sunday worship that is coming up on the horizon one day in this country, in this part of the world. What preparation? Get your heart right before the Lord. Get your eyes into the books. Get your life into the Adventist lifestyle. Get your prayers into the ways of eternity. Get your experience into a living, viable faith. My final statement. Said the captain, "This ship sails into the harbor. She will never go down." We can have faith in God's work in the last days. We sang earlier, hymn number 92, "This is my Father's world," in which we ascribed honor to the God of heaven. Appropriately, we sing as our last hymn in a few moments. You can turn to it in the hymn book, number 626. The official title, "In a Little While." I like another title as part of that opening phrase, "We're going home." In a little while, we're going home.